When Alpha King Aldrich was forced into an arranged marriage with Lady Celeste, supposedly the plainest woman in the neighboring kingdom, he expected a meek, forgettable bride who would give him heirs and stay out of his way. But the moment she walked into his solar with storm-gray eyes blazing and the scent of wild power radiating from her very soul, he realized he'd been deceived in the most shocking way possible. What happens when the ugly bride turns out to be the most powerful female alpha born in 3 centuries, and the other kingdoms discover they've been tricked? The massive iron gates of Fenwick Castle creaked open like the jaws of a sleeping dragon. King Aldrich Thornfield stood on the highest tower, watching his future bride's carriage roll through the morning fog. His hands gripped the stone walls so tight his knuckles turned white. Today, everything would change forever. The wind carried strange scents from the mountains, pine needles, fresh snow, and something else he couldn't name, something that made his wolf pace restlessly inside his chest. Aldrich had ruled the northern wolf packs for 8 long years, but he'd never felt this nervous before a battle. And marriage, he decided, was definitely a kind of battle. Your Majesty. Captain Gareth climbed the tower steps, his boots echoing against the stone. The old soldier's face looked troubled. We've received word from the mountain road. Aldrich turned away from the window. Speak quickly, Gareth. I can see the dust from her carriage already. Bandits attacked the Astorian group last night. 3 men dead, 2 wounded. But Gareth paused, scratching his gray beard. The strange part is, witnesses say a woman fought them off, not the guards. A woman from inside the carriage. Impossible. Aldrich frowned. Lady Celeste was raised in a convent. The marriage documents clearly state she's never even held a sword. That's what makes it strange, Your Majesty. The surviving bandits fled telling wild stories about a woman who fought like a demon possessed. Gareth shook his head. Probably just scared men making up tales to save their pride. But Aldrich's wolf stirred uneasily. Something about this didn't feel right. The marriage contract had been very specific about Lady Celeste Ashford. Plain face, quiet voice, gentle hands that had never known violence. Perfect for a king who needed heirs but didn't want complications. The sound of horses' hooves on cobblestones echoed from the courtyard below. Aldrich straightened his shoulders and adjusted his crown. Time to meet his fate. Bring her to the Great Hall in 1 hour, he commanded. I want to see this bride for myself. Down in the courtyard, the Astorian carriage looked like it had been through a war. Deep scratches marked the wooden sides, and one wheel wobbled dangerously. The driver's arm hung in a makeshift sling, and the horses stamped nervously, still spooked from their ordeal. But it was the silence that bothered Aldrich most. No crying, no frightened sobs from inside the carriage, just quiet. The carriage door opened with a soft click. A brown traveling boot touched the cobblestones first, then a simple gray cloak. Aldrich couldn't see the woman's face yet. Her hood covered everything from her nose up. But the way she moved, that wasn't the careful, hesitant step of a sheltered convent girl. She walked like a hunter. Welcome to Fenwick Castle, Lady Ashford. Aldrich stepped forward, using his most formal voice. I trust your journey wasn't too difficult. The woman's head turned toward him, but she kept her hood up. Thank you, Your Majesty. Though I suspect difficult might be too gentle a word for what we experienced. Her voice surprised him. Not high and sweet like he'd expected, but low and musical, with an accent that sounded more like mountain folk than nobility. And there was something else, a strength in her tone that made his wolf lift its head with interest. I've heard reports of trouble on the road, Aldrich said carefully. Bandits, they tell me. Indeed. She adjusted her cloak, still not lowering her hood. Foolish men who thought a small group would be easy prey. And were they correct? For the first time, she looked directly at him. Even with most of her face hidden, he could see her eyes, the strangest gray he'd ever encountered, like storm clouds right before lightning strikes. No, Your Majesty, they were not. The way she said it made goosebumps rise along Aldrich's arms. This was not the meek convent girl he'd been promised. This woman held secrets that could either save his kingdom or destroy it completely. Rest well, Lady Ashford, he said, stepping back. We have much to discuss before tomorrow's ceremony. As she walked toward the castle entrance, Aldrich caught another whiff of that strange mountain scent. But now he recognized what had been hidden underneath the pine and snow. wild honey, mountain roses, and beneath it all, the unmistakable musk of power. Real power. The kind that could challenge even an alpha king. His wolf began to howl softly, and for the first time in years, Aldrich Thornfield felt afraid, not of battle or death or losing his crown, but of discovering that everything he thought he knew about his arranged marriage was about to be turned upside down. The castle doors closed behind Lady Celeste with a sound like thunder, and Aldrich realized his quiet, boring political alliance had just become the most dangerous thing that had ever happened to him. Lady Celeste's hands shook as she poured water from the wash basin in her guest chamber. The ride to Fenwick Castle had been the longest 3 days of her life, and not just because of the bandit attack. Every mile had brought her closer to the moment when her carefully constructed lies would either save 2 kingdoms or start a war. She pushed back her hood and stared at her reflection in the mirror. Copper-red hair tumbled past her shoulders in waves that caught the candlelight like living flame. High cheekbones, full lips, and those storm-gray eyes that had been both blessing and curse her entire life. Her father had spent years convincing neighboring kingdoms that she was plain, unremarkable, forgettable. If only they knew the truth. A knock at the door made her heart jump. "Enter," she called, quickly pulling her hood back up. A young servant girl stepped inside, carrying fresh towels and a tray of food. "Begging your pardon, my lady, but His Majesty requests your presence in the solar. Says it's urgent." "Now?" Celeste glanced toward the window. The sun hadn't even finished setting. "Very well. Lead the way." The solar was smaller than she'd expected, with tall windows that looked out over the northern mountains. King Aldrich stood with his back to the door, but she could see his reflection in the glass. Strong jaw, amber eyes, and shoulder-length dark hair that he kept pushing back with his fingers. A nervous habit, she realized. So the mighty Alpha King could feel nervous too. "You wanted to see me, Your Majesty?" He turned around, and she felt her breath catch in her throat. The man was even more handsome up close, with the kind of raw strength that came from years of real fighting, not just throne room politics. But it was his eyes that held her attention, bright gold, that seemed to look right through her pretenses. "Please sit." He gestured to a chair by the fireplace. "And you can lower your hood. We're alone now." Celeste hesitated. Once she revealed her face, there would be no going back. But she'd come too far to lose courage now. She pushed back her hood and watched his reaction carefully. King Aldrich went completely still. His eyes widened, and she heard his breath hiss between his teeth. "You're not what you expected?" she finished quietly. "The marriage contract described you as plain. Unremarkable," they said. He stopped talking and just stared at her. "They said I was ugly." Celeste completed his sentence. "Yes, I know what the reports claimed. My father made sure those rumors spread far and wide." "But why?" Aldrich moved closer, studying her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Why would any father want people to think his daughter was unattractive? This was it. The moment she'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. "Because, Your Majesty, there are worse things than being thought plain." She stood up and walked to the window, needing distance between them. "There are things that could start wars. Things that could make other kingdoms decide that an alliance with House Ashford is too dangerous to consider." "What kind of things?" His voice was closer now. She could feel the heat from his body warming the air behind her. When she turned around, he was only an arm's length away, and she could see the gold flecks in his amber eyes. "The kind of thing that runs in bloodlines," she said softly. "The kind that skips generations, then appears when you least expect it. The kind that makes fathers lock their daughters away and spread lies about their appearance rather than risk the truth getting out." Understanding dawned on his face like sunrise. "You're not just nobility." "No." She met his gaze steadily, letting him see the truth in her eyes. "I'm not just nobility." The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Outside the window, night was falling over the mountains, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Then another, and another. King Aldrich's eyes began to change color, the amber deepening to pure gold, the pupils dilating. She could smell the change in his scent as his other nature rose to the surface. Pine trees, mountain stone, and underneath it all, the unmistakable musk of an alpha in his prime. "Show me," he whispered. Celeste closed her eyes and let the transformation begin. It started as heat in her chest, then spread outward like wildfire through her veins. Her canine teeth lengthened. Her nails grew into claws, and when she opened her eyes again, she knew they were glowing with the same inner light that marked all her kind. But it was her scent that made him stagger backward. Not just any shifter, not just any wolf. Alpha, female, powerful enough to lead her own pack, strong enough to challenge any male who tried to dominate her. Impossible, he breathed. Female alphas haven't been born in the Ashford line for over 300 years. 312 years, she corrected quietly. My grandmother kept very detailed records before she died. She always said the gift would return when it was needed most. King Aldrich ran his hands through his hair, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Do you understand what this means? If the other kingdoms discover we've been deceived about your nature, they'll claim the marriage contract was signed under false pretenses, Celeste finished. They'll have grounds to declare the alliance invalid. And House Grimwald has been looking for any excuse to move against the mountain passes. This could mean war. Yes. She straightened her shoulders, meeting his stare without flinching. It could. But it could also mean something else entirely. Which is, it could mean that instead of gaining a weak political bride, you've gained the strongest ally your kingdom has ever known. She stepped closer, letting her alpha nature rise to match his. It could mean that our children will carry the bloodlines of two of the most powerful shifter houses in the Northern Territories. It could mean that instead of managing a timid wife, you'll have a true partner who can fight beside you, rule beside you, and help you build something greater than either of our kingdoms has ever been alone. The golden glow in his eyes intensified. She could feel his wolf responding to hers, recognizing her not as prey or possession, but as an equal. As something he'd been searching for without even knowing it. And what if I don't want a partner? He asked quietly. What if I just wanted a simple marriage that wouldn't complicate my life? Celeste smiled, and for the first time since arriving at the castle, it was completely genuine. Your Majesty, I think we both know it's far too late for simple. The massive wooden doors of the throne room crashed open with a thunderous bang that made every noble jump. Queen Celeste burst through, her wedding dress torn and muddy, blood dripping from a gash on her arm. Behind her stumbled three of the kingdom's most important messengers, all looking like they'd been through a war. Your Majesty, the first messenger gasped, falling to one knee. The mountain passes. They're blocked. Giant boulders rolled down during the night. No one can get through from the east or west. Aldrich shot up from his throne, his wolf senses immediately picking up the scent of fear and lies mixed together. Something wasn't right. Those passes had been clear when his scouts checked them yesterday morning. Celeste's eyes met his across the room, and he saw something flash in them. Not fear, but recognition, like she'd been expecting this news. How convenient, Lord Brennan drawled from his position near the window. The new queen arrives, and suddenly our kingdom is cut off from the outside world. His cold smile didn't reach his eyes. One might think this was planned. The second messenger, a young woman with dirt streaked across her face, stepped forward. There's more, Your Majesty. Strange wolves have been spotted in the northern forests, bigger than our scouts. Their scent is wrong, like they don't belong to any pack we know. Celeste moved closer to the throne, her limp barely noticeable but enough to show she was hurt worse than she let on. These wolves, she said carefully, did they attack anyone? No, my lady. They just watched, like they were waiting for something. Aldrich's mind raced. Blocked passes, strange wolves, a new queen who seemed to know more than she was saying. The pieces didn't fit together in any way that made sense. Unless, Captain Gareth, he called out. Double the guards on all walls. Send riders to check every possible route through the mountains. But even as he gave the orders, Aldrich knew they wouldn't find any open paths. Someone had trapped them in their own kingdom, and his new wife was somehow part of it. That evening, Celeste found him alone in his private study, staring at maps of the surrounding territories. She'd changed out of her ruined wedding dress into simple clothes that made her look more like a warrior than a queen. You have questions, she said, closing the door behind her. I have a kingdom full of questions, Aldrich replied without looking up from the maps. Starting with why you don't seem surprised that we're suddenly under siege. She sat down across from him, wincing slightly as she moved her injured arm. Because this isn't the first time it's happened to my family. Now he looked up, Her storm-gray eyes held secrets that made his wolf pace restlessly. 3 years ago, my younger brother was supposed to marry the daughter of House Grimwald. The night before the wedding, our castle was surrounded by unknown wolves. The passes were blocked. We were trapped for 2 weeks. She traced a scar on her wrist that he hadn't noticed before. When the siege finally ended, my brother was dead, and the marriage alliance was broken. Aldrich felt ice form in his stomach. You think someone is trying to break our alliance the same way? I think someone wants to make sure this marriage never really takes hold. If we're isolated long enough, the other kingdoms will assume we've been weakened. They'll find excuses to attack. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. But there's something else you need to know about my family. Something that might explain why we keep being targeted. Before she could continue, a howl echoed through the castle walls. Not the sound of their own wolves, but something wilder, more dangerous. Both of them rushed to the window. In the courtyard below, a massive wolf stood in the moonlight. Its fur was silver-white, and it was easily twice the size of any wolf Aldrich had ever seen. Around its neck hung a collar made of black metal that seemed to absorb the moonlight. Impossible, Aldrich breathed. Celeste's hand gripped his arm. Not impossible, just very, very bad news. The giant wolf lifted its head and howled again. This time, answers came from the forest. Dozens of howls from dozens of throats. The castle was surrounded. What is that thing? Aldrich demanded. Celeste's face had gone pale. That's a dire wolf. They went extinct 200 years ago. Except, she swallowed hard. Except my grandmother used to tell stories about a secret group that kept some alive. Used them as weapons. What kind of weapons? The kind that hunt other werewolves. The attack came at dawn, but not in any way Aldrich expected. Instead of charging the walls, the dire wolves simply sat outside the gates and waited. Their massive forms created an unbroken circle around the entire castle, close enough that everyone could see their glowing yellow eyes, far enough away that arrows couldn't reach them. This is psychological warfare, Captain Gareth muttered, peering down from the battlements. They want us scared and confused before they make their real move. But Aldrich's attention was focused on something else entirely. In the great hall, Celeste was surrounded by a group of the castle's servants, and they were all talking in urgent whispers. When she saw him approaching, she quickly sent them away. What was that about? He asked. Just making sure everyone has enough food and water, she said too quickly, in case this siege lasts longer than we hoped. It was a reasonable explanation, but something in her tone made his wolf suspicious. He was about to press her for more details when a commotion erupted near the main gates. Your Majesty, a guard came running. There's someone at the gate. Says he has a message for the Queen. They rushed outside to find a man standing just beyond arrow range. He was tall and thin, wearing a cloak that seemed to shift colors in the morning light. Most disturbing of all, he showed no fear of the dire wolves surrounding him. Queen Celeste, of House Ashford, he called out, his voice somehow carrying clearly across the distance. I bring greetings from your uncle, Lord Marcus Ashford. Celeste went rigid beside Aldrich. I don't have an uncle named Marcus, she whispered. The mysterious messenger smiled, and even from far away, they could see his teeth were too sharp to be human. He says to tell you that your family's debt must be paid. The wolves you see around you are just the beginning. Surrender yourself, and your new husband's kingdom will be spared. What debt? Aldrich shouted back. The debt of blood and magic, young king. House Ashford has been borrowing power for generations. Now the price has come due. Celeste stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. Tell my so-called uncle that House Ashford pays its own debts. We don't hide behind threats and monsters. The messenger laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Such brave words from a little wolf who still doesn't understand what she really is. He turned to leave, then paused. You have until sunset to reconsider. After that, we take what we're owed by force. As soon as he disappeared into the forest, Celeste grabbed Aldrich's arm. We need to talk. Now. Privately. Back in the study, she began pacing like a caged animal. Everything I told you about my family was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. I'm listening. The Ashford line isn't just noble. We're descended from the first werewolves, the ones who could change at will instead of just during the full moon. But that power came with a price. She stopped pacing and faced him. Every generation, One member of the family has to serve as a guardian. They give up their human life to protect ancient magical barriers that keep certain things locked away. Aldrich felt his world tilting. What kind of things? Dire wolves were just the beginning. There are creatures out there that feed on werewolf magic. Things that could wipe out entire packs if they ever got free. Her voice cracked slightly. My grandmother was the guardian for her generation. She died when I was 12, maintaining a barrier in the northern mountains. And now they want you to take her place. Yes. But here's the thing they don't know. I'm not the only one with guardian blood. My cousin Elena was supposed to be chosen, but she ran away 3 years ago. That's when they started targeting my family, trying to force us to produce a replacement. A new howl echoed outside, but this one was different. Smaller, more desperate. They rushed to the window again and saw something that made Aldrich's blood run cold. A young woman was running across the courtyard, chased by 3 of the dire wolves. She was fast, but not fast enough. The wolves were gaining on her. "Open the gates!" Celeste shouted to the guards below. "Your Majesty, it could be a trap," Captain Gareth called back. "That's my cousin Elena," Celeste replied, already running for the stairs. "And if she's here, it means she's ready to fight." The rescue happened in a blur of motion. The castle gates opened just long enough for Elena to dive through, the dire wolves snapping at her heels. Arrows flew from the walls, driving the monsters back. Elena collapsed in the courtyard, gasping for breath. She was younger than Celeste, with the same storm-gray eyes but darker hair. When she looked up at her cousin, her expression was grim. "They've been hunting me for 3 years," she panted. "I've learned things, terrible things about what our family really did." "What do you mean?" Celeste knelt beside her. "The barriers aren't just keeping monsters locked away. They're keeping something else locked in. Something that belongs to us. Something powerful enough to end this once and for all." Elena struggled to her feet, her eyes meeting Aldrich's for the first time. "Your Majesty, your new wife isn't just descended from the first werewolves. She's descended from their queen. And if we can reach the heart of the mountain barriers, she can claim her true inheritance." "What inheritance?" Aldrich demanded. Elena's smile was fierce and wild. "The power to command every wolf that ever lived, including the dire wolves surrounding your castle." Outside, the monsters howled again, but this time it sounded different, like they were afraid. The screams from the dungeon made Celeste's blood run cold. She had been arranging flowers in the great hall when the sound cut through the morning air like a blade through silk. Without thinking, she dropped the white roses and ran toward the source of the terrible noise. What she found in the castle's lowest level made her stomach twist. 3 of Aldrich's men surrounded a young woman who couldn't have been more than 16. The girl's clothes were torn, her face streaked with dirt and tears. But it was her scent that made Celeste's wolf surge forward with protective fury. The girl was a shifter, and she was terrified. "Stop!" Celeste's voice rang out with such command that all 3 warriors froze mid-motion. "What is the meaning of this?" Captain Gareth stepped forward, his face grim. "Your Majesty, we caught this spy trying to poison the well water. She refuses to tell us who sent her." The girl looked up at Celeste with desperate golden eyes. "Please," she whispered. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was only trying to help my little brother. He's sick, and they said the castle's healing spring water could save him." Something in the girl's voice made Celeste's heart ache. She knelt down beside the trembling figure, ignoring the shocked looks from the guards. "What's your name, child?" "Mira," the girl said softly. "I live in the forest village beyond the eastern hills. My brother caught the wasting sickness 3 weeks ago. The village healer said only spring water blessed by royal wolves could cure him." Celeste felt anger building in her chest, but not at the girl. "So you risked your life to steal water for your dying brother?" Mira nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. "I know it was wrong, but he's all the family I have left. Our parents died last winter from the same sickness." The guards exchanged uncomfortable glances. Captain Gareth cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, we still need to question her about—" "No." Celeste stood up, her voice steady but fierce. "This child will be my guest, not your prisoner." She turned to face the shocked warriors. "Have you forgotten what it means to protect the innocent? This girl isn't a spy. She's a sister fighting to save her brother's life." One of the younger guards stepped forward. "But Your Majesty, The laws about trespassing. The laws serve the people, not the other way around, Celeste said firmly. Mira, you'll come with me. We're going to get water from the healing spring, and then we're going to save your brother. As they climbed the stone steps back to the main castle, Mira walked close beside Celeste. Why are you helping me? I'm nobody special. Celeste smiled sadly. Because somebody special once helped me when I thought I was nobody too. They found Aldrich in his study, bent over maps of the kingdom's borders. When he looked up and saw Celeste with the young girl, his expression shifted from surprise to concern. Celeste? Who is this? This is Mira, she said, her hand resting protectively on the girl's shoulder. She has a sick brother who needs our help. Aldrich listened carefully as Celeste explained what had happened. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, studying Mira's hopeful face. The healing spring hasn't been used for outsiders in 50 years, he said slowly. The old traditions forbid it. Celeste felt her heart sink, but then Aldrich continued. However, traditions that let children die while we hoard healing water aren't traditions worth keeping. He stood up and moved toward the door. Come, we'll go to the spring together. The healing spring lay in a hidden grove behind the castle, surrounded by ancient oak trees. The water bubbled up from deep underground, crystal clear and warm even in the cool autumn air. Legend said it had been blessed by the first wolf king centuries ago. As Aldrich knelt by the spring's edge, his eyes began to glow with the golden light of his wolf. He cupped the water in his hands and whispered words in the old language, words of healing and protection, passed down through generations of rulers. The water will stay pure for 3 days, he told Mira as he filled a silver flask. That should be enough time to reach your village and cure your brother. Mira's face lit up with joy and relief. Thank you, both of you. I'll never forget this kindness. But as they walked back toward the castle, Celeste noticed something troubling. Several nobles had gathered in the courtyard, and they were watching the three of them with dark expressions. Lord Brennan stepped forward, his face cold with disapproval. Your Majesty, word has spread about your charitable activities. Many are concerned about this break from tradition. Concerned about saving a child's life? Celeste asked, her voice sharp. Concerned about a queen who ignores established laws? Another lord replied. First you reveal powers that should have been declared before marriage, and now you give sacred healing water to common criminals. Celeste felt her wolf stir with anger, but Aldrich placed a calming hand on her arm. The girl committed no crime except loving her brother, he said firmly. That's not how the law sees it, Lord Brennan said. Trespassing on royal grounds, attempted theft of sacred resources, these are serious charges. Then perhaps our laws need to change, Celeste said, her voice carrying the authority of her royal position. A kingdom that won't help its own people isn't worth ruling. The tension in the courtyard grew thick as more nobles gathered. Some nodded in agreement with Celeste's words, while others frowned with disapproval. She realized this moment would define not just her reign, but the kind of rulers she and Aldrich would become. Young Mira clutched the silver flask tightly, her eyes wide with fear as she watched the adults argue about her fate. In that moment, Celeste made a decision that would change everything. From this day forward, she announced, her voice carrying across the courtyard, the healing spring will be open to any who truly need its power, rich or poor, noble or common suffering, recognizes no social boundaries. A gasp ran through the crowd of nobles. Some looked scandalized, others impressed, but it was the hope that lit up in the eyes of the castle's servants and common folk that told Celeste she had chosen correctly. Lord Brennan's face darkened with anger. Your Majesty, you cannot simply overturn centuries of tradition with a royal decree. The other noble houses will never accept such radical changes. Then they'll have to choose, Aldrich said, moving to stand beside his wife. They can either support a kingdom that cares for all its people, or they can find themselves new rulers. As the crowd began to murmur and disperse, Celeste felt both triumph and worry warring in her chest. She had won this battle for Mira and her brother, but she could sense that larger conflicts were coming. The question now was whether their kingdom would unite behind their new vision of leadership, or tear itself apart in the struggle between old traditions and new hopes. The attack came at midnight, when the castle slept under a blanket of winter stars. Celeste woke to the sound of steel clashing against steel, echoing through the stone corridors. Beside her, Aldrich was already moving, pulling on his clothes with the swift efficiency of a warrior king. "Stay here," he commanded. But Celeste was already reaching for her own weapons. "Not a chance," she replied, strapping a silver dagger to her thigh. "We rule together. We fight together." They rushed through the castle halls, their bare feet silent on the cold stones. The sounds of battle grew louder as they approached the main courtyard. Through an arrow-slit window, Celeste saw the terrifying truth. At least 30 masked warriors had surrounded the castle, their weapons gleaming in the moonlight. "Lord Brennan," Aldrich growled, his wolf scent mixing with barely controlled rage. "This has his stench all over it." They burst into the courtyard to find chaos. Castle guards fought desperately against the invaders, but they were badly outnumbered. Captain Gareth stumbled past them, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "Your Majesty," he gasped. "They're not trying to take the castle. They're trying to capture the Queen." Celeste's blood ran cold. This wasn't a random attack. It was a trap designed specifically for her. Before she could react, a voice rang out across the battle. "Surrender the false queen, and no more blood will be shed tonight." The fighting paused, as everyone turned toward the main gate. There stood Lord Brennan, flanked by warriors from 3 different noble houses. His face was twisted with righteous anger and political ambition. "You have brought shame upon this kingdom with your deceptions," he called out to Celeste. "Marriage contracts built on lies, traditions thrown aside like garbage, sacred healing waters given to common thieves. Enough." Aldrich stepped forward, his eyes blazing with golden wolf fire. "You dare attack your sworn king?" "I attack no king," Brennan replied smoothly. "Only the foreign sorceress who has bewitched him with unnatural powers. Once she is removed, you will return to being the strong leader this kingdom needs." Celeste felt sick as she realized the depth of Brennan's plan. He didn't want to kill her. He wanted to discredit her publicly, making it seem like she had used dark magic to control Aldrich's mind. If he succeeded, their marriage could be dissolved and Aldrich's rule would continue under Brennan's influence. "I challenge your right to make this accusation," she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard with surprising strength. "By the ancient laws, I demand trial by combat." A shocked murmur ran through both sides of the fight. Trial by combat was an old tradition, rarely used in modern times. If Celeste won, her accusers would be proven wrong by the gods themselves. If she lost, "You cannot fight in your condition," Brennan said with a cruel smile. "Everyone can smell it on you. You carry the king's air. A pregnant woman cannot engage in trial by combat." Celeste's heart stopped. She had suspected for weeks but hadn't been certain. Now, in the worst possible moment, her secret was revealed to everyone. She saw Aldrich's expression shift from rage to protective terror as the reality hit him. "Then I will fight in her place," Aldrich declared, drawing his sword. "No," Brennan shook his head. "The accused must fight for herself, or accept judgment. Those are the laws you both claim to respect so much." Celeste looked around the courtyard at the faces watching her. Some showed sympathy, others curiosity, and a few revealed barely hidden hostility. She thought about young Mira, probably home by now, nursing her brother back to health with the blessed water. She thought about all the other people who needed their help, people who would suffer if the old, harsh ways returned. "I accept the challenge," she said firmly. "Celeste, no!" Aldrich grabbed her arm. "You could lose the baby. You could lose everything." She looked into his desperate eyes and smiled sadly. "If I don't fight, we lose everything anyway. At least this way, we have a chance." She turned back to face Brennan. "Name your champion." A figure stepped forward from behind the lord. A huge man wearing black armor, his face hidden behind a wolf skull helmet. Even without seeing his features, Celeste could smell the darkness that clung to him like smoke. This was no ordinary warrior. "Sir Marcus the Ruthless," Brennan announced. "Undefeated in 43 battles." The champion drew a massive 2-handed sword that seemed to drink in the moonlight. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding stone. "I have killed queens before, little wolf. Your royal blood will taste no different than any other." Celeste drew her own blade, smaller, lighter, but sharp as winter wind. Around them, the castle guards and noble warriors formed a circle, creating an impromptu arena in the courtyard. As she faced her opponent, Celeste felt her unborn child flutter inside her. A tiny movement, that filled her with both fierce protectiveness and terrible fear. She was fighting not just for her own life, but for the future of their family and kingdom. The champion attacked first, his huge sword whistling through the air with deadly force. Celeste barely managed to dodge, rolling sideways as the blade crashed into the stones where she had been standing. "Too slow, false queen," he taunted, advancing with surprising speed for such a large man. But Celeste had learned to fight in the wild mountains of her homeland, where quickness mattered more than strength. She danced around his attacks, looking for openings, slowly wearing him down. The battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Celeste's smaller blade found its mark several times, drawing blood through gaps in the champion's armor. But his sword came dangerously close to ending the fight with each swing. Then disaster struck. As Celeste leaped backward to avoid a crushing overhead blow, her foot slipped on the blood-slick stones. She fell hard, her sword skittering away across the courtyard. The champion raised his weapon for the killing blow. Around the circle, she heard Aldrich roar with helpless rage. Time seemed to slow as the massive sword began its downward arc. But instead of closing her eyes, Celeste looked up at her attacker. In that moment of perfect clarity, she saw something that made her heart race with sudden hope. A small gap in his armor, right at the base of his throat. Using her last reserve of strength, she rolled forward instead of away, sliding between his legs as the sword crashed down behind her. In one fluid motion, she grabbed a fallen dagger from the ground and thrust upward, finding that tiny vulnerable spot with deadly precision. The champion staggered, his hands going to his throat as dark blood poured between his fingers. He fell to his knees, then forward onto his face, completely still. The courtyard erupted in chaos. Some cheered Celeste's victory while others shouted accusations of treachery. Through it all, Lord Brennan's face had gone white with shock and rage. "This proves nothing," he screamed. "She used witchcraft, dark magic." But before anyone could respond, a new voice cut through the noise. Old, cracked, but carrying unquestionable authority. The only magic here was courage. Everyone turned to see ancient Elena, the castle's eldest resident and keeper of the old laws, hobbling into the courtyard with her walking stick. At 93 years old, she had outlived 4 kings and was respected by nobles and commoners alike. "I watched this trial with my own eyes," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "The queen fought with honor, skill, and the blessing of the moon goddess herself. Lord Brennan, your accusations are proven false by divine judgment." The Lord's remaining supporters began to back away, unwilling to argue with both the trial's outcome and ancient Elena's wisdom. Brennan himself looked around desperately, realizing his plan had completely collapsed. "This isn't over," he snarled, pointing at Celeste. "The other kingdoms will hear of this. They will not accept a wolf witch as their neighbor. Then they will find themselves at war with a kingdom united under true leaders," Aldrich said, moving to help his wounded wife to her feet. As Brennan and his remaining allies retreated into the night, Celeste allowed herself to lean heavily against her husband. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaky and exhausted. "Are you hurt?" Aldrich asked, his hands gently examining her for wounds. "Is the baby?" "We're both fine," she assured him, though she wasn't entirely certain. "But this is just the beginning, isn't it? There will be others who challenge us." Aldrich looked out at the faces surrounding them. Castle guards who had fought bravely, servants who had watched the trial with worried eyes, and nobles who were now seeing their queen in a completely new light. "Let them come," he said quietly. "Tonight proved that we're stronger together than anyone imagined." As dawn began to break over the castle walls, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Celeste wondered what new challenges the coming days would bring. The trial was won, but the real battle for their kingdom's future was just beginning. The great bell tower cracked like thunder, splitting down the middle as Celeste's scream of rage shattered the ancient stone. Below in the courtyard, 300 wolves from rival packs surrounded the castle, their howls demanding her death. "They want to execute me for lying about who I am," Celeste whispered, her hands shaking as she watched the army below. Blood dripped from her palms where her claws had cut deep. "Aldrich, they're going to tear me apart." The morning sun cast long shadows across the battlements, but those shadows seemed to move on their own. Enemy wolves crept closer with each passing minute. Their leader, a massive black wolf with silver eyes, stood on his back legs, and shifted into human form. "Queen Celeste!" the man shouted, his voice carrying across the stone walls. "I am Commander Voss from the Eastern Kingdoms. You have broken the sacred laws of marriage contracts. Come down now, or we will come up and get you." Aldrich pulled his wife behind the thick stone wall, his own wolf clawing to get out and fight. "We can run. My fastest horses are in the stable. We could reach the northern borders before nightfall." "No." Celeste's voice grew stronger, like steel being forged in fire. "I'm tired of running from what I am. I've spent my whole life hiding my strength because people told me it was wrong. Because they said women should be weak and quiet." She walked to the tower window, her red hair flowing behind her like a battle flag. The pendant around her neck caught the sunlight, sending sparkles across the stone floor. For the first time since the enemy arrived, she smiled. "You know what's funny, Aldrich? My father told everyone I was ugly, because he thought my beauty would cause wars between kingdoms. But he never realized that my real power would cause an even bigger war." Below, more wolves arrived every hour. The black commander shifted back into wolf form and began circling the castle walls, looking for weak spots to attack. His pack spread out like a dark river, covering every escape route. "There are too many," Aldrich said, counting the enemy forces. "Even with our best fighters, we're outnumbered 5-1. Celeste turned from the window, her storm-gray eyes now glowing with golden light. "Then we don't fight them with numbers, we fight them with truth." She began walking toward the door, her footsteps echoing in the stone chamber. Aldrich grabbed her arm, his face pale with fear. "Celeste, what are you doing?" "Something I should have done years ago," she replied, pulling free from his grip. "I'm going to show them exactly what kind of queen I really am." The great doors of the castle swung open with a boom that silenced every wolf in the courtyard. Celeste stepped out alone, wearing a simple white dress that made her look like an angel of war. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold stones. Commander Voss shifted back to human form, his massive body towering over her. "So, the Lion Queen finally shows herself. Do you have any last words before we carry out your sentence?" "Just one question," Celeste said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent courtyard. "Are you really here because I lied about being weak? Or are you here because you're terrified of what happens when women stop pretending to be powerless?" The commander's face twisted with anger. "You broke the law. Marriage contracts must be honest about bloodlines and abilities. You deceived an entire kingdom." Celeste laughed, the sound ringing off the castle walls like silver bells. "I deceived no one about my bloodline. I am exactly who I said I was, Lady Celeste Ashford, daughter of the Mountain King. The only thing I hid was that I refused to be small just to make you feel big." Her body began to glow with silver light, and the air around her shimmered like heat waves. Every wolf in the courtyard took a step backward, even the commander. "You want to see what you're really dealing with?" Celeste asked, raising her arms toward the sky. "Let me show you what happens when a female alpha stops apologizing for her strength." The transformation that followed was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Instead of the usual painful shifting, Celeste's change flowed like water, like moonlight made solid. Her wolf form was enormous, silver white with eyes like burning stars. She was twice the size of any female wolf in the known world, and her howl shook the very mountains. But she didn't attack. Instead, she sat calmly in the center of the courtyard, her massive head tilted as she studied the enemy pack with ancient wisdom. Commander Voss shifted back to wolf form, preparing to leap at her throat, but his own pack members began backing away, whimpering in submission to the power radiating from this impossible queen. "I could kill every one of you right now," Celeste said, her wolf voice carrying clearly in their minds. "But I won't, because a true alpha protects, she doesn't destroy. A real queen builds up her people, she doesn't tear them down." She stood on her powerful hind legs, towering over even the largest male wolves. "I am Celeste Ashford Thornfield, Queen of the Northern Kingdoms, Alpha of Alphas, and daughter of the ancient bloodline that ruled these mountains before your great-grandfathers were born. I bow to no one, I apologize to no one, and I will never again pretend to be less than I am just to make others comfortable." The silver light around her grew brighter, and one by one, the enemy wolves began to lower their heads in submission. Even Commander Voss found himself unable to maintain eye contact with those blazing star eyes. Now, Queen Celeste continued, her mental voice gentler but no less powerful, you have a choice. You can try to fight me and learn exactly why my ancestors were called the Mountain Gods. Or you can return to your kingdoms and tell them that the age of weak queens is over. 2 months later, Queen Celeste sat in her private garden, gently rocking her newborn son, while humming an ancient lullaby her grandmother had taught her. The baby's tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb, and she marveled at how something so small could make her feel so completely happy. He has your stubborn chin, Aldrich said, settling onto the stone bench beside them. His arm wrapped around his wife's shoulders, and he pressed a soft kiss to her temple. And definitely your powerful lungs. The whole castle heard him demanding breakfast this morning. Celeste laughed quietly, careful not to wake the sleeping infant. Poor little prince. He has no idea he's going to grow up in a world where his mother changed everything just by refusing to hide who she was. The garden around them bloomed with late summer flowers, roses and lavender that filled the air with sweet scents. Butterflies danced from bloom to bloom, and somewhere in the distance she could hear the sound of children playing in the village below. Do you ever regret it? Aldrich asked, his voice thoughtful. The confrontation with Commander Voss, I mean. You could have been killed. Never, Celeste replied immediately. That day I finally became who I was always meant to be. Besides, she added with a mischievous grin, you should see the letters I've been getting from other kingdoms. Apparently, quite a few princesses and queens are tired of pretending to be helpless flowers. 3 young women approached the garden gate, their faces bright with excitement. They wore traveling clothes and carried small bags, clearly having journeyed far to reach the castle. Your Majesté, the tallest girl said, curtsying respectfully. I am Princess Elena from the southern kingdoms. These are my friends, Lady Sarah and Lady Maria. We've come to ask if you might train us. Celeste's eyebrows rose with interest. Train you in what exactly? How to be strong like you, Sarah blurted out, her cheeks red with embarrassment. How to stop apologizing for being smart and fast and powerful. How to be the kind of women who change the world instead of just decorating it. The baby stirred in Celeste's arms, opening sleepy blue eyes that were already sharp with intelligence. She looked down at her son, then back at the 3 hopeful young women. Being strong isn't about never being afraid, she told them gently. It's about doing what's right even when you are afraid. It's about protecting others, not just proving how powerful you are. We understand, Elena said eagerly. We want to learn how to be leaders, not just wives. How to make decisions that help our people, not just look pretty at royal dinners. Aldrich squeezed his wife's hand. What do you think, my queen? Ready to start a revolution? Celeste stood carefully, the baby secure in her arms. I think the revolution already started the day I walked into that solar and decided to be myself instead of what everyone expected me to be. She turned to address the 3 young women, her voice carrying the same quiet authority that had faced down an army of enemy wolves. If you truly want to learn, then welcome to the northern kingdoms. But understand this, I won't teach you how to be me. I'll teach you how to be the strongest, truest versions of yourselves. The world doesn't need more copies of Queen Celeste. It needs the first Princess Elena, the first Lady Sarah, the first Lady Maria. As the sun set over the mountain peaks, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Celeste felt a deep sense of completion. Her son would grow up knowing that both men and women could be strong. These young women would return to their kingdoms and change them from within. The old ways of keeping women small and silent were crumbling like autumn leaves. You know what the best part is? She whispered to Aldrich as they walked back toward the castle, their little family complete and their future bright with possibility. What's that? Our son will never have to wonder if his mother is proud of who she is. And our daughters, when they come, will never have to hide their strength or apologize for their power. She paused at the castle door, looking back at the garden where 3 young revolutionaries were already deep in conversation about changing their world. The ugly bride they thought they were getting? She never existed. But the powerful queen they got instead? She's going to make sure no girl ever has to pretend to be less than she is ever again.